The Secrets of Technology is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Technology. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Technology, where we discuss the technology news that's important to you from a uniquely Catholic point of view. And joining me today on the panel are Father Andrew Kinstetter. Hi, Father Andrew.
Hello.
And Pat Scott. Hi, Pat.
Howdy do.
Folks, before we get started, I do have a little bit of news, a little bit of network news, the StarQuest Network. You can now get all our podcasts on Spotify. If you go to Spotify and you search for one of the podcast names like Secrets of Technology, or you could search for SQPN and in the podcast section. If you do that, you'll find all of our podcasts listed, and you can. So it's not really subscribe on Spotify; it's follow, and you can add us to playlists and all that sort of stuff. But it's all there, and so it's just another way that we want to make it possible for you to enjoy all of our shows, however it is that you want to enjoy them. So. Go if you check out Spotify, and we're looking at even more things we can do in the future. There's all kinds of places available now for having your podcast pop up in various places. So today our topic is going to be it's summertime, and in the summer it's a thing. People like to read books. They go on vacation, they take books with them, or you go to the beach, you bring a book. And so I wanted to talk about technology related to books for bookworms. I love books. If you could see me now, like Father Andrew and Pat can, you would see just a few of the shelves that exist in my house full of books. And I can see Father Andrew has a bunch of shelves, and I know, Pat, you have a ton of shelves full of books. We're
downstairs, yeah.
We're all bookworms here in on this podcast, and maybe you are too. So I wanted to start by talking about technology for books, but I want to throw it to both of you. Which do you prefer? Do you prefer to read a book on an e-reader or in paper form? Father Andrew, I'll start with you.
I definitely prefer the paper form, actually.
Okay.
I have a Kindle, and I've tried to take it on, trips and stuff, but there's something about me that just loves the physicality of a book that you miss in an ebook format. So I definitely prefer a physical book.
How about you, Pat? What do you prefer?
I actually prefer reading it on an e-reader for a bunch of reasons. But because mainly I can adjust the font size and things like that. And it keeps track of where I was, where I might not remember on a physical book. I guess, yeah, and basically it's just that I like the advantages of the ebook. One of the things I do miss about paper books, though, is I can remember a passage and find it by where it was on a page, and you can't do that on an ebook.
That's a good point.
And I can remember things in context of that physicality. But other than that, I prefer ebook.
So for me, I vastly prefer the ebook. I just... a few years ago, maybe more than a couple of years ago now, 5 or 6 years ago, I switched to reading almost entirely on ebook because I just found I wasn't reading, because my book was always sitting on my bedside table where I would read it for 10 minutes before I fell asleep at night and didn't remember what I read. Whereas now with a Kindle or my phone or my iPad, I'm always carrying it with me. It's always with me. Also, I have every book I've ever purchased with me at all times. And if I want a new book, I just buy it or as we see in other things we'll be talking about soon, borrow it, and it shows up on my Kindle. But here's another one which I think it's probably just me being weird. I don't like to read the back of books. Like if I could have a book, if someone could say, read this book, I'm not going to tell you anything about it, but you're going to love it. That's the ideal to me. I don't like to know, like when you read the blurb, it always tells you too much. But even more, when I can see my progress in the book, I know I'm getting to the end. I start to anticipate, okay, this is what's going to happen. We're almost done. you know. Whereas if I don't know how much is left, I know I'm weird. If I
No, this is right. Yeah.
if I don't know how much is left, I'm more in the story. I don't get pulled out of the story. So for all those reasons, I really do like. I prefer to read on an ebook. And then there's more things like highlighting and then some other stuff that'll come up in a bit as we talk about it. So that's interesting. So an interesting generational divide. Pat and I are older than Father Andrew. We're from a time when there were no ebooks, and yet so that's. But I find it's also Father Andrew. I think you're part of the generation that also likes records, like music records and phones with wires and things like that. So that's sort of that, like the technology nostalgia.
I don't know if you noticed, but I'm pretty sure on Kickstarter there is a Bluetooth cassette player that's being currently funded. So
that's awesome.
Retro is in, apparently.
I actually might buy that because I have so many cassette tapes that I need to rip. Okay, so that's an interesting way to start. So let's talk about e-readers. And when you talk about e-readers, there's really one that sits on the top of the pile. I mean, that they have, 90% of the market, and that's Amazon's Kindle series. Do you guys have a? So I assume you all have a. I think Father, you said have a Kindle, right?
Yes, I do.
And Pat, you have a Kindle?
Actually, I don't have a Kindle anymore. I have a Kindle app that I use constantly.
Okay.
But I do occasionally use other ebook formats. For instance, Google Play, because I get occasional, here, you can have a book for 99 cents. So I'll go get one off of Google.
Oh,
but yeah, you're right. Kindle is the biggest one, but I do use some other ones.
I didn't realize that Google Play, but I guess you're right. Because there's also Apple Book.
Yep.
Used to be iBook.
Yes, Apple Books. I've got some of those.
I've got a whole bunch of them, and I never read them. I don't read on my iPad or my phone like I do on my Kindle. And that's actually another point is as a single-use device, I don't get pop-up notifications that distract me. I don't have I'll just go check Facebook for a second, or I just want to play this game for a little bit. No, it's when I'm reading, and that's all that's got my attention. And I think that's one of the advantages of an e-reader that's just an e-reader,
a dedicated one.
Yeah, but
it's also the advantage of a physical book too.
Yeah, well, this is true.
I love to go to a coffee shop with just a physical book and just unplug.
that is a good point.
I understand. Yeah,
that is good. What was I going to say? Well, I lost my train of thought there. But so there are different kinds of Kindles available. They go all the way from like a $90 basic Kindle all the way up to a $280 Kindle Oasis. I get the appeal of the Oasis to someone who's really into books. I bet it feels really good and looks really good in the hand. I haven't held one, but from all that I've seen, it sounds like really good. But I don't know if I could justify spending $280 just on the device.
Isn't it waterproof too? Wasn't that the big thing?
Yes,
and
that's
where the
thing.
Other ones aren't.
And it's got an adjustable light for like the warmth of it, so cold to warm the light, so as the day changes and that sort of thing. Whereas, so I have a Kindle Paperwhite that I bought with. So the nice thing with the Kindles is if you buy it with ads, so that it displays ads, it's cheaper. So you'll get an ad every time you look at it, when you're not reading it. But then when you turn it on, then the ad goes away, and you don't see it again until you turn it off again. But eventually, I bought the ad free because I think I just didn't like some of the ads I was getting. I probably shouldn't have. I probably should have just stuck with it and just and not spent that extra money. But it's so the Kindle Paperwhite is now apparently waterproof. The newer version.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah.
And the other advantage is unlike with your phone, when you're reading it out in the sunlight, it's you can still see it. Which is apparently the same advantage that a paper book has too, right, Father?
Yes.
Yeah, totally.
So the Kindle Paperwhite. I mean, I would say if I was going to be getting a book, a new ebook reader, I'd probably get a Kindle Paperwhite, which is I think they start around $130 now. I've had mine I broke my first two Kindles that I had. I used to keep it in my back pocket. That was a mistake. And so,
Oh
and then,
no.
well, first one was the back pocket. I think the second one was, it got wet. This was pre-waterproof days. But this third one has lasted me for 5 or 6 years, and maybe, yeah, maybe 5 or 6 years. So they last a long time.
And the kids are older. The chance of it breaking with the kids is probably less.
Yes, yes. Well, and in fact, my oldest is 13, and we've got her a Kindle. We're now talking about perhaps getting Kindles for the others as they get older. One thing that the Kindle doesn't have is tracking. So, like Find My Phone or the equivalent on Android, if you misplace your Kindle, you can't find it. So I have the tile on my Kindle, my daughter's Kindle, and my wife's Kindle, and my daughter is constantly coming to me and asking, "Daddy, can you ping my Kindle? I don't know where I left it." And so,
So does she prefer a Kindle over a physical book?
I don't think so. I think she likes the Kindle because for the books that are available in Kindle. So for all the books that I've ever purchased, she's in my household. So all the books that I've purchased, my wife has purchased, are available to her. So a whole library is there. Plus all of Amazon has tons of free copyright free books. So that they cost $0 and because they're out of copyright, all the classics. And so those are all on there as well. So she'll read all those. But she just as much loves to sit down with a good paper book and read that too. So there isn't it's not a one or the other for her, I think. I think she would miss it if she didn't have it, but I don't think it would be devastating to her. So yeah, it's an interesting thought. I think it's just another way of reading for her. And she's a real bookworm.
Do we want to talk about some of the advantages of electronic books? Because I was thinking one of the biggest things for me is when I travel, I've got every book that I ever need.
Right.
Where I used to carry 12 or 14 paperbacks just to get through a week.
Yes.
And so that's a big difference for me.
I remember the days of going on vacation, not that long ago, by the way, where going on vacation and packing 3 or 4 books in my luggage, sometimes a hardback, because that's what I'm reading, and trying to figure out what can I leave behind. Do I really need all these clothes? Because I need something to read this week. But now it's electronic gear that I'm trying to find room for. So I think I've only just replaced one problem with another. But
but this is thinner. It is smaller.
Yes, that's true. And so, yeah, I think that is a huge advantage of ebook readers in general, is you have every book you've ever purchased available to you wherever you are. And frankly, I like the idea that even with the app on my phone, when I have a few minutes, I'm standing in line or I'm waiting somewhere, I can pull out my phone, and because they sync, I can keep reading my book, which is good. Have either of you had experience with the Nook, Barnes and Noble's e-reader?
No, I went straight to the Kindle and never looked back.
Honestly, I don't think I know anybody who has that experience.
That's if why they're out of business.
Yeah. Well, if any listeners you can still buy them. They're still out there. So if any listeners out there are using a Nook tablet of some kind, because they let us know. Why do you like it? Why do you prefer it? Is this a positive choice in favor of it, or something you just that's the direction you took and now you're locked into the ecosystem? Let us know. And that's actually an important point we should mention is once you've chosen an ecosystem, you're kind of stuck. If I wanted to switch from Kindle to Nook, for some reason, I wouldn't be able to take my books with me from Amazon.
No.
That's definitely a disadvantage. And in fact, we'll talk about that in a few minutes about the how you can get stuck with ebooks that you purchased, that you think you've purchased, that you don't. But we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So if any of the listeners have used the Nook, I would love to hear from you. Again, Apple Books, they look beautiful. They work nice. The apps are nice. I have a bunch of books and I just never get around to. I just don't think to read them.
What the Apple books did for me was there were several interactive books, especially children's books, that you couldn't do with a Kindle. And so for that was one niche that Apple has. I don't know how many they're still putting out, but for a while I had an Alice in Wonderland that was just gorgeous.
Yes. I had a couple of kids' books myself that were like that. And comic books look really nice, or graphic novels look really nice on the Apple books. I've got some kids' books, Curious George, and some other like tech manuals that have interactive elements and videos and things built into them. And those work really well there. So I have used it for those sorts of things. And I try to like textbooks of various kinds back in the day, but again, I just haven't kept up with it. What I'd really like to see is Apple putting some time and effort back into its iBooks Author app that it had for a while. I know it's moved some of that functionality into its Pages app, but I'd like to see some of that get some love again, and maybe see that people be able to produce their own books through that again in an easier way than the iBooks Author allowed them to do.
Right.
So that's the various devices, and then the apps like you can read on your phone. Oh, one of the disadvantages, by the way, of the Kindle app on your phone, at least on iPhone, not on Android, is you can't buy books from within it because of the limitations that Apple places on what apps can do. Apple wants to take a cut of any of the sales, and Amazon does not want to give it to them. So
right, but I just have another icon on my right beside it that takes me straight to the Kindle store.
Right.
I buy it, turn around, and get back into the other app.
Right.
So I don't find that big a deal.
Yeah, and in fact, so you can go to the website and buy it, or you can go to the Amazon app, that itself. And I think for
that's
some
really
reason,
a web though.
Well, yeah, I think because it's an e-commerce thing, there's some difference. I'm not sure what the difference is, but it's some weird difference. But just so you can't buy it from within the app. You can buy it from a browser, and that's
right.
One of the challenges is with being someone who loves book is finding good books to read. So how do you guys find the books that you want to read? How do you get recommendations for books? Father Andrew, where do you get your ideas for what to read from?
I would say that most of my recommendations all end up coming from probably social media, whether it's kind of the word of mouth, friends who are reading something, or people out there like Bishop Robert Barron who's recommending a book, or different authors that I might follow. I follow Del Rey, which is the publisher for Star Wars. So I'm very much aware of what's coming out for Star Wars, and I'm on top of that because of the social media and because I follow the various authors. I don't typically just go to, Amazon and just browse for books.
Right.
I don't really do that. I tend to look for kind of a niche sort of area of what I look for in books. Or if I go to Barnes and Noble, I always hit the sci-fi books and just browse it, even though I don't really get anything or look at anything in particular.
Right. The days of when I used to go to Laureate Books or Barnes and Noble or Walden Books, those are the local, the couple of local ones for like Laureate was local here. I would go in there as a kid while my mom was shopping for clothes at the mall. I'd go to the bookstore and browse and just look at books. But those days you're right, they're long gone. Pat, how do you find books to read? Which books you're going to read next?
Facebook and my daughter's feeds. No, but in addition to that, I agree. I've got some authors that I'm following. And the other thing is that I have subscribed over time to a couple of different free book services. One was called BookBub, and the other one was called, is called The Fussy Librarian. And I like The Fussy Librarian better. It's more curated.
Interesting.
But basically, they tell you what books are free or $1 on Kindle, on the Apple, Amazon store. And then you say which categories you want to see notifications for. So I can say science fiction, I can say classics, I can say murder mysteries. And that's the type of books I might get 2 or 3 of each kind in an email. And I can specify once a week, twice a week, whatever. And so I'll skim those, and every other couple of weeks I'll pick up one or two from there.
Interesting. So a couple of things I do is so I follow certain authors on Amazon. So if you have an author that you've liked their several books that they've published or whatever, or if they have a series, you can follow them on Amazon, and then Amazon can send you emails saying, "Hey, if you like this guy, you might like this." So that's helped me a little bit. It certainly helps me keep up with my favorite authors' new books as they come out.
Right.
Constantly pre-ordering new books. I subscribe to several publishers' newsletters. Certainly the Del Rey Star Wars newsletter, email newsletter. Tor Books, which has been a long time sci-fi.
Tor, yeah.
And in fact, Tor does, I think they do a free book of the month. So once a month, I think it is, they'll send out a link and you can download it and read it. And I found some are good, some are not so good, but I found some interesting stuff that way. A lot of social media, recommendations. One of my favorite series by an independent author is called Wearing the Cape. It's a superhero series, and I learned about that from my friend Father Roderick Von Hogen, who saw that on Amazon. And this guy, Marion Harmon, has self-published, and they're so much fun. They are really cool superhero stories that are in a world that is it's the sort of world that's constructed that there are rules, and the rules make sense, and it's hard to describe, but you could download the first 10 chapters of the book for free and read it, and I did. I got hooked, and now I've read all of his books, and I'm waiting for the next one. And then I follow some of my favorite authors on social media as well, and they will sometimes recommend books of other people in their genre. So I do that. One of the things, one of the sites I use is Goodreads.com, and this is owned by Amazon, but it's a book community, a reader community, and a lot of your social media friends will be on there, and I get like a daily email where people are updating. I've finished reading this, and I'm reading this now, and so I see a lot of stuff that way. And one of the nice things is because I read on a Kindle, it automatically updates my list of what I've read and what I'm reading on Goodreads. I have a widget on my website that shows what I'm reading now. And here's the thing that's really gotten me reading a lot more than I was for a few years, and that is the annual reading challenge. Every year you set a goal for yourself, and this year I think my goal was 35 books. And it keeps track for you. And it shows what your friends are reading. And oh my gosh, like if you're competitive at all, this is the gamification of reading, and it's got me. I'm a book behind right now. I've got to catch up. I read Brandon Sanderson's gigantic book at the beginning of the year, and now I'm behind, and so it's a lot of fun. So Goodreads is an excellent resource. Do either of you use Goodreads.com?
I have an account, and so it does kind of get updated, and I have friends that I'm friends with on there. But to be honest with you, I don't use it hardly at all. Okay. And I probably should.
Yeah.
But I don't.
I go on it once about every, 8 months or so, and I'll get excited and find out what people are doing, and then I'll never go back to it for another 8 months again. But it's given me a boost to know what some of the people I know are reading.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to see, and I kind of enjoy writing reviews of certain books, and so it's a place you can also write reviews, and I like reading other people. I have several friends who are prolific readers. My friend Jeff Miller, who you may know from the blog The Kurt Jester, he reads something like 250 books a year. He's a machine. I don't know how I know how he does it. He converts many of them to audio. He's a computer engineer, so he strips them out of the text and turns it into a spoken, and he listens to it fast or something like that. I don't know exactly how he does it, but he's amazing. But so I have some friends there who I like to follow on that. So that's and then of course one other thing I want to recommend is this week's episode of Let's Talk, also on the StarQuest Network. Let's Talk number 55. I'll have a link in the show notes. Was all about recommendations for books that to read this summer. So check that out. So podcasts are a great way to get recommendations. And in fact, I'll let you all in a little secret. I'm really trying to get a Let's Read podcast going. A podcast that I would call Let's Read, where we get people together to talk about what they're reading now, and maybe it would be a variety of people like we do, a panel that changes each week, and so we could talk about cool, interesting books that we're reading. But that's still in the planning stages, and so hopefully we'll get that. So if you're interested, let me know. If that's something you'd listen to, then that gives you a little more impetus.
So like a podcast version of a book club.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, just yeah. Although
that's a great idea.
Not so much discussing the same book, but just what are you reading now, and what's it about, and what do you like about it, and then the people who are on the podcast could ask questions about it and kind of quiz the person, like, what do you think about this, and what just to draw some of it out. I'm not sure exactly what form it would take, but so I'm still percolating that idea. But yeah, could be more like a book club even too. That would be interesting too. So that's for the future. But check out the Let's Talk number 55 and some of those book recommendations.
And before we move on, I do want to make a point about social media that I found to be very, very awesome with authors and everything is in the technology world that we live in. Is there is such a easy way to connect with authors that I would have never expected when I was growing up.
Right.
So I've been able to contact some of my favorite authors either on Twitter or Instagram, and actually have had conversations with them. And in fact, one of them had some Latin questions for me because he knew that I was a Catholic priest. And so actually he's going to send me one of his newer books here in September free of charge because I helped him out.
That's awesome.
And just to be able to interact with the authors, I found to be very, very cool. And just, again, they're people too. And to get to know them in a small way is just really cool for book lovers. And I love it. So
it is pretty great.
I remember when Melanie had written several reviews of a book of an author's work, and later on he came back and contacted her and incorporated her review into his blog, and it was just such a cool thing.
Yeah. So Melanie is my wife and Pat's daughter, and I think what you might be thinking about is Guy Gavriel Kay is a novelist who my wife is a huge fan of, and she wrote a blog post about one of his books, and he tweeted, here's a good close reading by an obviously well thought out blogger about it by Melanie Bettinelli. And I'm like, wow, that's cool. One of your favorite authors. Yeah. I was excited for her. She was over the moon. But yeah, that was really neat. Actually, the flip side of that, here's an interesting little anecdote. I'll take a little bit of a tangent. So back about 20 some odd years ago, when I was new on the internet back in the late 90s, I worked for an organization called Catholic World News. We were the first Catholic news service online. We delivered our news by email every day. So that's how we didn't have a website at first. I mean, that's how old it was. And when the Da Vinci Code came out, in the acknowledgments, he acknowledged Catholic World News as a source. And my boss and I were like, oh my gosh, that's a terrible thing. We don't want to do it. Apparently he was using our news service for some of the material he was butchering to create the Da Vinci Code. But because he was online and was able to use the internet, I mean, so back in the day when that was all still relatively new. And so that's the flip side of being close to the authors online.
Can be dangerous.
Yes. Dangerous to your reputation.
But it's also cool to meet these authors in person too, if you can ever get a chance to do that.
Oh yeah.
There's a new you might know this, Dom, but there's a new Star Wars Thrawn book coming out in July.
Yes.
Or actually this month.
The third in the trilogy, yeah.
Timothy Zahn is going to be in Denver next week.
Ooh.
And so I'm going down to his release interview and party. And I've met him a few different times before, and so he remembers me, and even like connecting in that way beyond, because he's on social media, he's on Facebook, and he posts where he's going to be and those sorts of things. But meeting them in person is way more authentic and real and just awesome. And then you can interact with them, and give them your appreciation and love and support. And
Yep.
and another small little anecdote, I went to a Comic-Con in Denver and met one of my favorite audiobook narrators, Mark Thompson.
Oh, cool.
And he was one of the first, well, he was really the first celebrity status sort of person that I met that wanted to get a picture with me because I was a priest, not because I wanted a picture with him, but it was kind of this cool, reversal of roles there. And but again, cool to just interact with them beyond social media in person if you ever get a chance.
There's a particular advantage to being a geek priest. I've seen that for like Father Roderick as well.
I get noticed at cons when I go.
Yeah,
quite often.
And you get sometimes you get to do things that you might not otherwise do.
Yep.
So meeting these people because I think they always get charged, as I've heard from at these events, meeting the people who love their work. I mean, what's more cool than meeting someone who loves the thing that you labored over and created? I mean, that's a great point. So other ways to get books. Maybe you don't want to buy a book. Maybe you want to borrow a book. Your public library has always been a great resource, and now you don't have to troop down there necessarily to check out a book. There are a couple of different apps that let you search your library's catalog, but also do interlibrary loan. And which ones are available depends on which one your library has connected with. But so my local library is connected with Overdrive. Others have connected with Hoopla. But the nice thing is they also will do, not only do they help you with physical books, and our library is part of a larger network, a regional network, where we can borrow from. So if it's not my little town's library, they'll have it in, Boston, or one of the other suburbs library systems will have the book. And so not only can I check out books that way and renew them when they need to be renewed and all that stuff through the app on my phone, but you can also check out ebooks and audiobooks. And so Overdrive has a companion app called Libby, which is for borrowing ebooks, and I'm just trying to see exactly all the things it does. So it does ebooks and audiobooks that you can download. So you don't have to have an internet connection, or you could stream them. So they let you do it either way. You can download to your phone, but you can also send it to your Kindle, so you can read a checked out library book on your Kindle if that's something you want to do, and that's really great. I mean, there's just not enough all this good content out there for free. You don't have to buy, the Amazon's books. There's so much good stuff out there that's free. Now, because you're checking things out, there are limited numbers. Sometimes you get in a waiting list, just like with a regular library. So, be prepared for that. But there are great, you mentioned audiobooks, and we love audiobooks in my house. We're listening right now using Audible, which is the Amazon's audiobook service. We're listening to the Arthur Ransom Swallows an Amazon series of books, which, if you don't know, they're novels about the kids in England in probably, I'm not sure exactly the time period, but I think it's between the wars, between World War I and World War II, and these kids who they summer on a lake in the Lake District, and it's just wholesome, good, wonderful adventure stories about good kids, and that doesn't have any of the stuff that you see sometimes in books for kids today. And we just listen to them on car rides when we go on long trips. If we're in the car for more than 20 minutes, I flip it on, and the kids are quiet and they're all listening and they love it. But so these audiobook services, especially through your public library, are wonderful. So Libby and Overdrive are
and Hoopla, yeah,
and then Hoopla is the other service. So do either of you use those?
I use them a lot, and some things are available in one service and some things are available in another. They also let you check out movies as well.
Oh, cool.
And they're older movies, classic movies, that type of thing, things that may not have gotten big press, maybe some B movies too, but movies are also available there. One of the cautions I wanted to say, though, about ones you check out from the library, just like a library, there are limited copies, and when they get a copy, it's only good for X number of checkouts. Then they have to purchase it again.
Oh.
So I had people that were checking out 5 or 6 at a time, and then they only read one. or two. And that means that those copies are not any longer available. They've been used up without anybody really reading them. So I usually suggest getting one, maybe a second one, but don't stock up on them just so you'll have extras, because the library has to go pay for them again.
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't know that. Also, just like regular library books, there's a limited period of time that you have to read it. You can renew, but it's still limited the number of times.
One of the biggest advantages, I don't have overdue library fines anymore.
Yes,
because
true.
It automatically checks them back in for me.
That's right. Oh, that's
a biggie for me.
That's a biggie for my house too. So, that's cool. How about you, Father? Do you use?
I think I'm showing my age as a millennial, but no, I don't use the library services. I did when I was in seminary and was, using the library a lot for thesis work or for academic work. But since graduating and getting ordained, I have my library that I kind of port with me, and
right.
and usually just go to Barnes and Noble or Amazon to. Usually when I buy a book, though, it's one that I'm looking for. I don't just, buy a random book that I want to read. It's the next in a series or whatever, and I know that I want it, and I know that I'm going to keep it.
I have to be honest. I buy many more books than I borrow from the library, mainly because I'm always wanting the new books that are out, and they're never available, when I want to read it at the library. My wife though, and my kids, I mean, we're probably like the number one users of our public library system in our town. I mean, they know us big time. Yeah. So I'm
also a big rereader of my favorite series. So that just lends itself to me having it purchased and own it, and I can just go back to it whenever I want. And
of course,
I think I've read through the Harry Potter series, upwards of 10 times over the past, number of years.
Yep.
And that sort of thing is just something that I like to do. It's sort of a stress reliever. I can go back to something that I know and go, back to that fantasy world and enjoy it again. But
I'm with you on that. I've reread The Lord of the Rings, dozens, like more than I can count. So yes, I'm with you on that.
And I do that with electronic books too. I just can go back and reread them whenever I want, and just and it's a really nice way to not have to worry about having lost the book somewhere.
My daughter does that. So at 13, she loves to go back and reread just passages of books that she particularly liked, and that's really good when it's on the Kindle. She can just go to that section and bookmark it and keep coming back to it. So that's a
and
good
you can
point.
search. You can search on electronic books for particular words or topics or things like that.
I can't tell you how many times I've touched on a word in my Kindle in order to find out what it means. Like, because when I was a kid, I would just skim past them because I'm not going to get up and go find a dictionary to figure. So I would figure it out from context maybe. But a lot of times, even like stuff related to places, like it'll look up in Wikipedia for you, or even better, translate. Like I read like spy novels, for instance, and sometimes someone will say something in Polish or Russian or something, and they don't provide a translation because the author is trying to be, secretive and cool, and I'm like, I really want to know what that is. And so I tap it, and Google translates right in there. So really, I love that part of it. So let's talk a little bit about we've kind of touched on some of the disadvantages, but let's kind of talk about some of the caveats with ebooks. And one of those we talked about earlier, if you wanted to switch from Nook to Kindle or Kindle to Apple Books, you can't take your books with you. If it seems that Hollywood has figured this out. If I have a lot of movies that I've purchased, whether on Amazon or on Apple TV, but because there's the studios have like a unifying service. I think Disney Anywhere is one of them. No matter where I bought it, they make it they say you can watch this on any service that you have, so any device that you have. But books have not gone the same direction, and so if you buy your books on Kindle, you can't take them with you. You don't own your books, and that's a big difference. These these paper books I've got on my shelves, they're mine,
Mm-hmm.
and no one can take them away from me. And this was most clearly seen recently. Microsoft announced that their long defunct ebook service that they tried to get going a few years ago, that they were finally shutting down the servers. Not that it's like you could still have the book on your like the file on your device, but every time you open it, it has to the digital rights management connects with their server to say, hey, do they have a right to look at this? Is this theirs? And they're shutting those servers down, and so everybody who bought those books is out of luck. They're after that those servers are off, you can no longer access these books that you spent your hard-earned money on. So that's a definite disadvantage. What do you think of that?
Well, yeah, I agree with that. I guess the other thing is, though, that you still have the same issues, not just when a service shuts down, but when a person dies, that library, that collection, you don't have survivor's rights. If you happen to know your spouse's user ID password to get into the Kindle service or whatever, then you could still use it, but you don't have any right to do so. And so it's even worse with electronic things in terms of legacy.
Interesting. I know that Amazon has, like for my wife and I, we have a family account so that anything
if you've set up one of those, then yes, there's any one of them could continue using it. Yeah. That's true.
So that's something to like, maybe think about with any of these services is if they have a family account available, try to get in on that so that someone else, even if it's not your spouse, but someone else that is your benefit survivor, some sort, can take those with them when you are no longer here to use them. That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, and this goes true for any things that's electronic only, whether it's, like I said, I was talking about like movies or, when you pass on those, if those things the rights to those things do not pass on to people. And that's an important change in our society, I think, over how things used to be done.
Well, a slightly different, I won't say disadvantage, but, if you purchase a book and then later on they come back and fix the typos on it, you may not have the most current version. With the electronic ones, I get revised copies of them from the authors. Right. When that book, they fixed it, they've revised it, I get a new copy downloaded. Yep. So that's kind of an interesting take on it.
The collector in me is all about having that first edition with all the typos, and I'm okay with that. Then,
I mean, but also if you want to,
but new content.
Yeah, if you want to be,
that's true.
Conspiracy minded about it. That also means they can disappear things that are like a la 1984. Yeah. They could change the past or George Lucas. They could change things later. Like J.K. Rowling could come by and decide, I'm going to change all of this stuff about Harry Potter. He's now going to be called Harold Potter in all the books, and we've changed all the books. I mean, that's the sort of thing. In fact, that's not
She just does that on Twitter.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, my wife has run into. I keep talking to my wife. We should have had her on this episode. But she ran into something in the analog sense of this. She's in a book group reading Brideshead Revisited by Yves Lenoir, a great Catholic novel, and she's having trouble because the edition she's reading is different from the edition that other people are reading. Because apparently, at some point, he changed the novel. He published a new edition, and so there's different versions of the story out there, which makes it difficult when you're in a book group that you don't know what other people are reading.
I ran into that with one of Father Merton's books that he had written, about 15 years before he died. And then in the last couple of years, he came back in and added a bunch of things. And so at that point, I was able to get a copy of the new one, too, and I could compare to the old one. So that's kind of an interesting twist on that. But yeah, I'd hate to have things disappear on me.
Well, I mean, here's an ironic version of that. In 2009, Amazon removed copies of George Orwell's 1984 from people's Kindles because of a legal issue that they were having, which is again, a bit ironic given
that particular novel. Yes.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Any other disadvantages or caveats we would bring up about ebooks and book technology?
I mean, I would just say that I think this is sort of where we're going as a culture. Especially with the streaming services like Netflix and Disney Plus and all of that stuff, people already are moving into this realm of knowing that I'm going to pay for this service that I can watch and stream, but I don't really own.
Right.
And the way that the ebooks are working would more or less be sort of similar to that. I find myself still kind of resisting that a little bit, and I like the physicality, like I said, of having a book, or knowing that I own it versus I'm just kind of borrowing it until Amazon decides that I no longer have the rights to it. But I think also, though, on that front, we just trust.
Yeah.
Like, I trust that Amazon is not going to pull the rug out from under me and take away all my books. And I have no real fears about that. And I just, we trust, I think, is in general in that realm.
Amazon's not really going anywhere. I mean, they're a big company. Not anytime soon, anyway. Yeah, that's a good point. And as a society, we've made these sort of technology bargains before. Back in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, we said we're willing to watch TV for free over the air in exchange for having to watch commercials. We've made these sorts of we'll get something, but we have to give up something, an inconvenience of some sort, and we're making a new kind of bargain now, which is we're getting something which is this convenience of the ebooks, but we're also giving up something. And the question we always have to keep asking ourselves: are we getting a raw deal, or are we getting a decent deal? We're probably not taking advantage of these giant corporations at all. But are we getting ripped off? And that's one of the things we have to be alert to. So that's part of it. And then there's also, I have a potential solution to losing all your ebooks, but that'll be in my pick of the week. But that'll be coming up in a bit. So a solution so you don't lose them when servers shut down.
I was going to bring up something. We touched lightly on audiobooks,
yes,
but to me, they're just as important as the electronic reading type of book. And one of the things that's a real advantage is being able to have the audio and the printed version, and be able to sync them.
Yes.
And go from listening to it into the car to going and reading it in the coffee shop, and then going back and forth. You've got the advantage of having both medias available to you.
That is true. Amazon
that's something that has never been available before.
Is that WhisperSync? Is that what they call it? Yeah, that's the WhisperSync technology.
Well, actually, WhisperSync is, I think, that you synchronize your own copy of your books. I don't remember what they call the audio sync with that, but and I use one. I use audiobooks, especially if I'm in the car or if I'm sitting and doing some work, I can put them on and listen to them. Whereas the other ones, it takes more physical. I've got to actually sit there and read them. So, I can't do anything else while I'm reading a book, where I can do other things while I'm doing an audio book. So I see them both as being very equal in terms of how I use them. And
you usually you pay a few extra bucks to get the audio. If you buy the ebook, you can pay $2 and get the audio.
And audiobooks tend to be a lot more expensive than the Kindle books.
Right.
But so that's a defect there. I mean, it's a bigger investment in them.
And I would just throw in a couple things too. I think that's helpful for especially someone who's maybe struggling to read or has dyslexia or something. If you have the audiobook playing, you can see it physically in the Kindle where it's at and follow along. Yeah. So that could be, really helpful for someone in that situation. I find audiobooks a fun way to go back to my favorite series and experience them in a different way.
Yes. Right now I'm listening to Emma, which is a very old, classical book, but Emma Thompson is one of the readers. Oh. And she's got there's a couple of guys and her and one other woman, and listening to the audiobook in that form is just just fantastic.
Yeah.
It really engages me much more than I would have sat down and tried to read the physical book.
When I was in 5th grade, my teacher, she read us the first 3 Harry Potter books to our entire class, but she would make the different voices for different characters.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something about that experience that just has always stuck with me. And so every time I pick up an audiobook in particular, I love it when the narrators can change their voices and really bring the story to life in a way that just reading the words on the page, you have to use your own imagination, and that's great too. But there's something about the spoken word that is just super engaging and a lot of fun.
And when you have the author reading his own book, that's fantastic.
It can be.
It really is.
Some authors are not great performers, but it can be good when they do read it. Yeah. I'm thinking of the Little House books are read by the actress Cherry Jones. She is great because she's got an accent that really kind of evokes the frontier. And then the Swallows on the Amazon books I was mentioning, the woman who narrates that, she does all of the characters, like just such slight differences that even if the story doesn't tell you who's speaking, right away which whether it's a 5-year-old boy, a 13-year-old girl, a middle-aged man. I mean, you really get a sense that she's I don't know how they do it to keep track of all the different voices. It's amazing. One thing I want to mention that you reminded me of, Father Andrew, is about learning disabilities. One advantage of the Kindle, the Kindle Reader, is that they have a dyslexia font, a font that's designed for people with reading issues. My daughter, who is a bookworm, I mentioned before, that's one of the reasons why she does like reading on the Kindle, is that it has that dyslexia font that works really well for her. And I don't know all of the technicalities of why it works well, but the way it's designed to be advantageous for people who have trouble forming the letters in their brain as they read them. And so that's actually another advantage.
And it also reminds me that that's one of the things after my husband's stroke that it really helps him is listening to the Liturgy of the Hours at the same time he's reading it. Because it helps him to focus and it helps him to help with the processing of it, because he does have some language difficulties after the stroke. And for him, being able to have both of those really, really helps.
Pat, I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's another reason why I prefer physical books, is especially like if I am going to go sit in the chapel and pray, to have the Bible physically, or the Liturgy of the Hours physically in my lap, in my hands. There's more of a tactile. There's a sacredness. There's a professor in seminary used to like to say that books are incarnational.
Yes.
And just that whole idea that there's this, the sacraments are tactile. We touch, we taste, we smell. And we lose something of that when we switch to a digital format. So to be able to have the Liturgy of the Hours as the book in front of me that I'm praying from, or specifically also the Bible, I really like to have the physical book, even though of course I reference it on my phone all the time for various reasons. But there's just something about that I think is helpful, especially in prayer. And not that the digital format is bad or wrong, but
it's one additional sense that you're using in that prayer experience. Yeah.
Plus, it also means that you can leave your phone outside the chapel and not be distracted by the Facebook notifications.
There's words on a screen are ephemeral. They're virtual. They don't have the permanence that ink in a page made from a tree, that it has. So I'm with Captain Picard on that. But physical books, even in the 24th century, will still be important, I think.
Oh yeah, I definitely think so.
So this has been a great discussion. I really enjoyed it. And there's probably more we could say, and so I'm looking forward to hearing from listeners what suggestions they have for technology, for bookworms, for people who like to read as we go forward in future episodes. But before we get to our picks of the week, Pat, you had a follow up on our discussion in episode 25 about AdBlock Plus. That you wanted to mention. Yeah,
something was said in the discussion about how they had sold out to advertisers and that type of thing, and I wanted to follow up on that the from their own website and my own experience, basically they have a policy that they block obnoxious ads. They do not block all ads. And for an ad to be accessible on a website and left alone, it has to meet a lot of criteria. It can't be animated. It can't be jumping around. It can't be playing sounds. It's pretty much a text and a picture. And so if a company comes to them and says, hey, you're blocking our ads, we would love to have them not blocked. They say, well, you have to meet certain criteria in order to make sure that these are acceptable ads. And if you're a small-time business person, that's free. If you're a big user, guess what? Your donation is going to help fund us to keep us in business. So to me, the acceptable use policy means that this ad blocker gives a kind of a best of both worlds. You get some ads, but they're not obnoxious. And they, yes, some of the advertisers are paying, but the ads still have to meet that acceptable use thing, that their policy. And so I don't mind seeing the ones that just say sponsored ad and a little picture and a little verbiage. Yeah. I don't mind those. To me, it's still the advertisers are getting something out of it.
Right.
And I'm getting something.
And the website owner gets something out of it as well. Some
right,
revenue
exactly.
to keep the website up.
And the thing about AdBlock Plus, too, I've tried several different ones, but it's so simple to just reach up and say, okay, turn off the blocking on this site and remember that. And then from then on, every time you go to that site allows ads or allows the ad behavior like a bank might do to show you the reverse of a check, that type of thing. It's a very simple system where so many of the others, you had to enter them into a white list and it was just really painful. So I've really liked it a lot. And but that's the people that are saying, well, they let some people advertise because they're paying for it. It doesn't change the acceptable use. It still has to be very minimal ad.
Okay, good. That's a good perspective. Thank you. We also had a bit of listener feedback on that same episode, episode 25. Les Hammer writing in on our discussion about the 911, E911, and the troubles that they can have locating you where they don't have precise location data for you when you call 911. He says GPS and cell tower triangulation can also suffer from another problem. A stronger signal will be along the path with more metal rather than along the direct path. If you're outdoors, it may be okay, but inside buildings, not so. So, if there's a bridge between you and the cell tower, perhaps it may make a stronger signal than along the direct path to the cell tower and get your location off a little bit. So that's a good point to bring up and interesting there. So let's move on to our picks of the week. Father Andrew, what's your pick this week?
So my pick this week is something that I got from a good priest friend of mine, Father Brian. He and I went to seminary together, and he was ordained a couple years older than me, but he's also a huge bookworm. He's got way more books than me. And so something that he was looking for, and he roped me into doing this a number of years ago, was looking for a way to catalog his books. And so he found this website called librarything.com. And it's basically an online service where you can scan in your books using a barcode, or you can manually input them. It'll pull information from Amazon, and you can create a catalog of your books in your online presence on librarything.com. It's free up to 200 books. And if you want to go beyond that, it's, I think, $10 a year, or you can pay $25 as a one-time fee for a lifetime subscription, essentially, to the service. And there's an app with it as well. And the app it's really easy to use. You can just pull up a book and hit the scan barcode, and it'll scan the barcode and immediately add it to your collection, and you can sort them and everything. And it's a really phenomenal tool if you have a fairly large personal library. I suspect, Dom, you might benefit from something like this.
I actually have a Library Thing account with almost 1,000 books in it that I opened like more than 10 years ago. I have not been adding to it, but I have more to say about that in a second, but I'll let you finish.
Yeah. So also kind of this is a two for one pick of the week because with it they have developed what they're calling Tiny Cat, and it's librarycat.org. And basically that's a they create a simple user interface where you can show your catalog to people. They can see if it's available for you to check out as if you're hosting your own personal library service, and you can add users and they can check out and return books, and it's a handy way if you are into loaning your books out, so you can keep track of who's got your books, when they got it, if they returned it, if you don't want to go searching through your library. And they play really, really well together. So, and that's free to use for personal use as well.
Yeah, I have a long history of trying to put my library into some electronic form. I think I started with, way back in the day, an app for the Mac called Delicious Library, which had like that ultimate skeuomorph. I think they started the whole skeuomorphism thing back in the day, where your books appeared on shelves. And actually, I think at one point you could scan the barcodes using your phone camera, and then it would look it up on Amazon and put all the data in based on it. But I got, well, in the case of library thing, I got 1,000 books in and kind of petered out at some point. I have way more books than that even, but yes, I recommend if you're the sort of person who wants to catalog, keep track. I mean, one of these days I'll actually get this done. I might actually pay. My kids are old enough now; I could pay them to do it.
That's right.
It might be worthwhile, like a buck an hour to do that, because I can't pay $1 a book. I'd go broke. But yeah, that's a good pick. Thank you. That's excellent.
Yep.
Pat, what is your pick of the week?
Well, it's not exactly book related; it's print related.
There you go.
But I have had a lot of clients recently that were looking to escape the high cost of ink. And so I've been helping them order some of the Epson EcoTank printers. And I think you had some experience with those as well.
Yes, I have an older one. Yep.
And so basically the idea being is, instead of these little tiny cartridges that are so expensive, basically it comes with a place where you can refill them from bottles, and they have it made so that you can only put the ink in the particular color that it belongs, and it doesn't drip, and it's really been very helpful. And the cost of printing stuff goes way down when you're not having to pay for those horrifically expensive little cartridges. The printers themselves are a little bit more expensive, but
you're making up for getting the ink cheaper.
Right.
You're paying up front a little more.
Yeah.
Actually, I like this idea that that's an improvement they've made, which is that you can only put the ink into the right cartridge,
right,
and without spilling. I've had experience with the older one. I have the Epson 4550, which it's just, you get a bottle and you're pouring into a tank, and
that would be a little bit trickier.
Yeah. And if you don't empty the whole bottle, then you got to figure out a way to store it where it doesn't spill, because that ink gets everywhere if it spills. It's like It's like a copier toner.
Yeah.
It's just, once it's out, it expands. It's like something.
Yeah, basically you open the lid on these things, and it's one of these things that's keyed to the particular tank.
Oh, wow.
And so you put it on top, and it won't go in the other ones. And it's only when you set it down that it opens up and lets the ink pour in, and it pours in and finishes it up and shuts it off, and you pull it out. So it's really nice.
And you get like 2 years worth of, based on average printing. Obviously, different people have different.
Right.
But you
2
get
years worth of it. Yeah.
2 years worth of ink in the box. And then, I think I remember seeing somewhere saying that the most expensive substance in the world by volume, dollar per volume, is printer ink. because of how much you get, how much you
what
pay.
I had heard was it was higher than the cost of Chanel.
Yeah. Oh, it's more expensive than diamonds, than platinum, than anything in printer ink, which is kind of funny. But good pick. I like that. I like to see that they're coming up with ways to overcome some of these problems with printing. So that's nice. And you're not sending all these cartridges to the landfill.
That's another big thing, too. You've got bottles that you can just, when they're finished, they can be recycled.
So I promised you a pick to help you with your book problem. So you when the digital rights management goes away, that you still can read your books. And it's an app called Calibre. It's spelled the Canadian/British way, Calibre. I'll put a link in the show notes, of course. and it's a cross-platform app. It works on all the major platforms, and basically what it does is it lets you take your ebooks of whatever form, whether it's a PDF, a Kindle, an Apple iBook, which is an EPUB format, no matter what format you have it, and it will import it. It will search for all of into its database. It will search for all of the metadata about it and cover and all this other stuff, and let you choose which cover is the right one for that book and all this stuff like that. But the best part is it will then let you convert it. And so all of my Kindle books, which I've purchased, I've backed up. I'm not giving them to anyone. These are backups, but I've backed them up in an EPUB format, so a DRM-free EPUB format on my computer. So on my backed up NAS, so that they get back to the cloud, and that way, even if something happens to Seattle and Amazon goes away, I still have access to these. Or if I decide I don't want to do business with Amazon anymore, I still have these books I paid for that I could still read. They're part of my library. So and I've done this. I've done it with PDFs that I've gotten in various places. My wife had a Honor Harrington series from was that David Drake? Forget who did it, but a series of science fiction novels where one of them back in the early 90s came with a CD in the back with all of the books in the series in text format on the CD. Those are all on there in various formats, and then so everything goes in there, and it's all safe and sound. And so, if people who had been using the Microsoft ebook servers, if they'd used Calibre, they'd be sitting pretty today. So just something to think about. But as long as you're not doing it to strip out the DRM and then give the book away to other people. Hey, the authors deserve to get their royalties for the work that they've put into it. So, and don't do that to them. But this is for your personal backup. So Calibre, that's what it is, and it's free, of course. It's an open source project, which is really nice. So those are our picks, and so I think that wraps it up. We're just a little programming note. We're not going to be here next week. We're taking a little time off for summer vacation, but we'll be back the week after that, and we'll be talking about the news and all the things of technology that there is to talk about. So before we close it, I do want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Technology this week, including AJ, Jenny N, Thomas Z, Matt and Yolanda, and Sean F. Their generous donations, their generous financial support at sqpn.com/give makes it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Technology and all the great shows that we're doing at StarQuest. And we have some new shows there. If you want to check them out, please. There's some great new content, and including one I'm particularly proud of called Raising the Bets, a show I do with my wife. And so go check those out. And if you want to join our patrons in helping support us as we continue to make more great content, you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. What do you think about our discussion about the ebooks and the advantages, disadvantages? Let us know. Do you prefer print to paper to ebook, and one or the other? We want to hear from you about your bookworm technology ideas. Let us know by going to sqpn.com/technology or the SQPN Facebook page, which is facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. You leave feedback there, or send an email to technology@sqpn.com. And you'll find the relevant links from our discussion today on our show notes on sqpn.com. Please remember, like I said before, you can subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, and now on Spotify, you can also listen on YouTube, where we upload audio versions of our program. And if you do that, subscribe on YouTube, hit the bell to get notifications. Until next time, Pat Scott, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Technology.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Father Adrian Kinstetter, thank you as well.
Absolutely. You're welcome. This is always fun.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Technology on StarQuest.